Hi, this is Lethea from Farm View Creators. Today we're going to paint the God Bless America bunting round from the Rust Covered Cottage by Christina. It has lots of layers. I love that about it. It has lots of dimension because of it. So I'm going to go in with Waverly antiquing wax and stain the bunting pieces. I had the idea that I would just stain parts of it. And then when I got in there, I was like, that's a little much. So I went back in and finished staining all of it. Then I get the second piece of bunting, get that all covered. I'm using a terry cloth covered sponge that I picked up at Lowe's. I love these sponges because they just do a really good job of spreading the stain evenly without being too messy. Then I'm going to give it a really good dry, make sure it's all dry, and then I'm going to put my pieces side by side because I'm going to go in with FolkArt Crackle Medium. You have to shake this up really good. The more you shake, the better your crackle is going to be. And then I'm trying to give an even coat. Again, my original idea was just to put crackle on the white portions of the bunting, and I decided that was just a little much, a little too complex for me. So I went over the whole thing with crackle. The crackle does have to dry for an hour. I like to let it air dry as much as possible. Then I am going over the entire round with my Waverly antiquing wax. My husband always thinks it's a shame to paint over Christina's kits because the wood grain is so beautiful in all of them. So as a nod to him, I decided I would cover the back with stain. And then I'm making my sticky board to hold my little stars and my pieces. Notice how I kind of have my letters hanging off and not stuck completely. I tend to be kind of rough on my pieces, so I want to make sure that I don't break them as I pull them up. And I'm going in with DecoArt buttermilk and giving those stars a nice layer of buttermilk. I go thin at the beginning and then I get thicker with each layer that I add. I went in, started with my brush on the letters, and I was getting too much buildup in the nooks and crannies of those letters, so I decided to grab a sponge and went back over with that sponge dauber, and it went so much faster at that point and much more smoothly without all that buildup. And I was worried about the buildup making the letters kind of wonky, so I'm glad I switched to a sponge. So I get that all covered, and then I move on to the red, which is FolkArt Imperial red. I love this red. It's not a true red, it's a deeper red. I like traditional, but I like to give it a little bit of a twist. And then I'm going to go in with FolkArt navy blue and cover that strip that's going to have the stars on it eventually, giving it a nice coat, and I'm making sure that I smooth it all the way across so it's nice and even. Then I'm going to give that a good dry before I move on, and I'm just kind of touching up those stars with a second coat and trying to really be mindful of making sure that the coats are even and that I'm not missing any spots, and especially with the sponge that there's no thinner areas that I need to hit again. So that's, I'm going back and hitting those areas. Then I'm going to get a second layer on that red. I just love how rich that color is. And then navy is always perfect, so I love any shade of blue. Giving that a good dry. Then I'm going to go in with my dark wax, and I started to put some dark wax on the blue and it just wasn't showing, so I moved on, had another idea. Just getting some distressing on there. If you get too much, you can always wipe it back. You can use a paper towel to wipe it back, or a wipe. Getting all the edges of the stars. I'm not too worried about it getting on my fingers and making smudges on the stars because I want it to look worn out and vintage. And then I'm going to hit those letters, trying to get the inside pieces of the letter as well. Just gives it some dimension and kind of roughs it up a little. And that always takes a little while, but it's so worth it. Notice how I'm supporting my letters so that I don't accidentally break them. I've learned from experience to be very careful with the thinner cut pieces of any wood kit. If you do break it, it's very easy to glue those pieces back together, so no big deal, but I do try not to. Then I was thinking I could go back in with some buttermilk to do my distressing on my blue, and I was just using some leftovers on my parchment paper and then needed some more, and then it came out a lot brighter on that side, so I went back on the first side and added a little more, put that aside to dry. And then I like to go ahead and seal and put a top coat on my pieces before I glue them together. I love Dead Flat by Paint Couture. It is my favorite sealer right now. So I hit a thin layer over all those pieces. The reason I like to do it before I glue them together is because when I've tried with my dimensional pieces already glued together, I tend to have pooling where the layers are glued together, and I don't want that at all. So I'm just giving everything a nice quick layer of that Dead Flat. It really does take all the shine out. I love matte. There is a time and place for shine, but I'm in my matte era. Then I'm going to put that aside to dry. And I'm going to glue my stars onto my navy piece. And you'll see I'm trying to be real careful and get them in the score lines. You can still see the score lines after you paint, but I wanted to make sure that I had them nice and straight and where they were supposed to be. With the art glitter glue, I'm really loving how fine the tip is, so you can really be very mindful of how much glue you're using. It's a small bottle, but it doesn't take much, and it doesn't make your fingers sticky, and it gives you a little wiggle room after you put your pieces together. So there I was just making sure that my crackle was fully dried. I did have to hit it a little bit with my dryer. And then I'm going in on that top row of the bunting and the next to last row and adding my buttercream. I'm having to really be careful to stay in the lines. Trying to go quickly because it is crackle and you have to move quickly with crackle. But I wanted my line sharp. And at this point I was thinking, what have I gotten myself into? Because I am not a good freehand painter. I have trouble painting straight lines, as you can see. I finally just kind of gave up on the buttermilk and decided, oh, well, I can fix it with the darker colors when I go back in. And so then I was a little more relaxed about it, and it went better. And I could already see the crackle showing up on the first piece, and I really love how buttermilk crackles. It just really shows the crackles through. I've said it before, but I love Crackle Medium because it is so unpredictable. It could change from section to section depending on how thick that you get it. So I'm hitting that with a dryer because I do need to go back in and do my other colors that I originally was not going to crackle, but I'm glad I did. I think it added a little touch of something. So I was kind of getting some buildup of those buttercream color pieces on the edges because I did not want that to dry completely. I want to get it out of the way before that. And then I needed to kind of turn, and I was worried about what brush I was using. when I went in with the blue, trying to really get a nice sharp line. That did not always work, but I was learning how to control my brush a little better, and I thought I would have it down pat, and then it wouldn't work on the next piece. So again, I'm kind of second guessing myself this whole time, but I did enjoy it. It was pushing me out of my comfort zone there, and I thought it turned out pretty good. And then getting on that second piece, look how awesome that crackle looked already. Really trying to make sure that I'm getting those lines. And sometimes I would be like, oh, that line does not look good. So I'd try to fix it. And then I'd be getting way too wide. And now we're going back in with that Imperial red. Hitting that good. That was a little easier because I only had to get one line really straight before I could just go to town. And you'll see that some of them are not perfect, but it's for me, so that's all right. And I'm not after perfection. I say that, but I am a perfectionist. All right, and then we're going into the second piece with that red. Honestly, at this point, I was counting how many pieces of bunting I had left because I was getting a little stressed about that. But I do love how these colors look together. Kind of a non-traditional twist on the traditional. And I'm hitting it with a dryer. As you dry, more of that crackle pops. And you can really tell that the crackle does show up better on those lighter colors, like the buttermilk. Then I went in to do the stars. Oh my, the stars. Some of them look really good, and then others look like wonky starfish. And again, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And then I would kind of get one that looked really good, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. I know how to do this. And I'd do the same exact thing on the next star, and it would look like it had gotten smushed. I did use a angled brush and kind of tapped to do the straight lines, and then did a fine tip round brush to fill in the centers. I could have gone back and done a second layer on these stars, but honestly, I did not want to push my luck. And one more, counting down those stars. It was a struggle, but I think the end result is worth it. And really, from this view, it doesn't look too bad. And that's true. Sometimes when you're right up close on something, you're seeing those imperfections more. And if you step back, you cannot even tell. And that's what I was reminding myself as I was painting these. One more. I was so excited at this point. Now, hitting those stars, getting them really, really dry. The paint was a little thicker in some places, and they were not even. But again, I didn't really want to push my luck and go in for another coat. So then I'm just dressing the edges of each of the piece of bunting, really hitting those stars too to kind of hide those imperfections. And that worked really well. I was quite happy with how the dark wax from Debi's DIY kind of hid those imperfections. I tried to go over my lines where I switched colors and hit the edges and those stars just to make it look more even, appear more even, and give it that older vintage feel. We have bunting hanging on our front porch right now, getting ready for the holidays. So as I was painting this, I kept looking up and referencing our bunting to make sure that I was getting the color pattern correctly. And then I'm going in with my dead flat from Paint Couture and hitting all of those fan pieces, trying to be as even as I can. And you'll see that I would notice the little spot I missed, and I would go back and grab that one. No biggie. Then hitting that with a dryer. I want to make sure it's real dry before I start putting all my pieces together. And then really and truly, I wasn't sure about doing the whole background stained, but when I started laying those pieces on top, I was like, yes, this is great. And Todd's right. The wood grain in the wood kits, it's so beautiful. So you'll see that I do a lot of staining. I have lots of colors of stain. I tend to lean towards the browns and the grays with my stain, but I have been known to throw in a teal stain, making sure my letters are nice and straight and with the score lines. And I was using a brush to kind of take out any excess art glitter glue. It dries clear, but I didn't want it bubbling up. And then just making sure that all those pieces are lining up perfectly. And then when I put the navy piece on, I could not remember the top from the bottom, so I'm really feeling it. And I was like, nope, wrong way. And when I put it the other way, it fit perfectly. Just holding that down, making sure it's adhering nicely, and then adding that last little piece. I love it. Look at that crackle. So pretty. And there we have it. Thanks for watching. The link to this kit will be in the description.